Welcome, everybody. My name is Nujor. Introduce you to our speaker today. Scott Fox is the CEO of StartupCouncil.org. He's a serial internet entrepreneur, angel investor, author, and evangelist for innovation, an advocate for startup founders and innovation ecosystems worldwide. Scott has written 3 best-selling entrepreneurship books to increase access to Silicon Valley style expertise and investment for entrepreneurs globally. Today, he mostly invests in early stage software ventures, mentoring them in startup fundraising and growth strategies. Scott is an active startup investor, including with Tech Coast Angels, Thai Women's Fund, and is the chairman of Stanford Angels from Orange County, California. A graduate of University of Michigan and Stanford Law School, he's a popular ecosystem growth consultant and keynote speaker at conferences and media worldwide. He leads the Startup Council, whose training, resources, events, and free email newsletters accelerate success for underrepresented and first-time entrepreneurs worldwide. And he's got a very popular YouTube channel as well. Scott, welcome to Bangladesh Angels. Nice to have you.
Thanks, Nurjaro. Nice to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, lovely. And for those in the room, the context is when Scott and I met through Global Business Angels, and we had a conference this past September in Australia, and we had a great time kind of exchanging notes and our backgrounds, and I thought it's nice to kind of have a follow-up with the rest of the community. We asked this question to everybody who comes through, and I would love to ask you this question as well. Could you tell us a little bit more about where you grew up and what did you want to be when you were younger?
Sure. I grew up in Detroit, which is an industrial city in the middle of America. And I grew up in the 1980s mostly, which was when it was in decline. So it was a very resource poor area. Unemployment, it's based around the auto industry there, and that economy essentially collapsed. So it was a tough place to be. I grew up in the city of a declining employment, declining opportunity. So I was raised with ambition, I guess, because, when you don't have much, you want more. And the opportunities at that time seemed to be really working for big companies. That was the role model that I grew up with in our culture. Ford and General Motors and the big car companies were the employers where I grew up in. I guess we're going to talk about some of that, but that eventually led me to corporate employment, which I then realized wasn't necessarily for me. And I went and become more of an entrepreneur, which led to what I'm doing today.
Excellent. Yeah, and I noticed you started a career in finance, you pivoted to law, and then you were in the music industry for a bit. Both as a leader in a label and then your own kind of VC-backed music startup or company of sorts. Tell us a little bit more about that pivot from corporate finance world to the startup sector and becoming an entrepreneur.
Sure. Well, it's unique to my time and place and situation. So I don't know that it's a story that's going to help other people for themselves, but maybe the principles would. The principles, I guess, were that, like I said, I started with the desire to work for the man, and then I eventually realized I'd rather be the man. And so for me, that started, and also, like I said, I was looking to make money because of where I came from. I didn't have much. So I went to New York and I became an investment banker, which is the obvious road to immediate money. And I did very well there and learned a lot. It was very challenging. And I guess that's one principle I'd take out of my background is for young people is to go into environments that are challenging, that pay as well as you can find, but that also are growing. And that was the key to my first career. My success there was going into an area that was growing. If an area is growing, you rise faster, right? If you do well, there are going to be more opportunities as opposed to shrinking areas, which may be more secure, maybe even pay better at first. If they're declining, like the car companies where I worked, job insecurity is more common than growth. So anyway, so I got into finance, did well with that, realized it wasn't what my long-term dream was, and made enough money that I had some options. So I pivoted and decided that New York was great, but the West Coast of the United States and California looked a lot better, and moved out here and been here for a long time now. And my personal interest, the other big thing that Detroit is known for is Motown, is music. And I grew up with a lot of music in my background, and I just really enjoyed that. Not as a musician so much, although I played some instruments and stuff, but I wasn't good enough to be. I realized I wasn't good enough to be the musician, but I was interested in the business. So I went to the business side of the entertainment industry in Los Angeles after I graduated from Stanford for graduate school. and did that for a while. But the pivot point for me was that I was at Stanford in the 90s when the internet essentially emerged as a commercial opportunity. And so I did a bunch of things. The short version of this, I did a bunch of things, but then I realized the internet was, like I said, the growth opportunity of a lifetime. And I took the combination of my background in finance and entertainment and business and my interest in creative work and created a startup about that. And I got into startups. And that's another story if we want to talk about that. But that led to the excitement of startups. And that's what I've been doing now for 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to just take a small amount of time just talking about the company you had created, because you had it at the height of the dot-com boom and the whole kind of euphoria of what was happening, and so many companies coming through. What did you learn, I guess, from that process? What ended up happening to that company?
Yeah, well, that was it was a challenge because at that point the internet was new enough, and this is ancient history, so I don't know that this is replicable, although it might be, I guess, if you're in AI or maybe some areas of crypto or new frontiers of deep tech or space, perhaps. There are markets that are completely new these days, like the internet was. But the challenge then was first to educate people that this internet really was a thing and it was going to be really big. And nobody, the established players, didn't believe that necessarily, especially in the music industry. They were making so much money selling CDs to people that they didn't care about virtual distribution and streaming and downloads and all the things that were very obvious if you, anyway, had been at Stanford and could see that the distribution model of the internet replaced most of their business, which was printing, manufacturing, and shipping discs and boxes to stores around the country, right? So it was really obvious, but nobody would listen. So anyway, but I had a financial background, so I was able to convince, and Stanford degree, which helps, right? And I convinced people that they should invest money to help me solve that problem. The short version of that is 3 years of my life invested in an idea that was way too early, because I was right. But as you well know, as a fellow venture investor, timing is as important as being right. And being right too early is the same as being wrong. So I would encourage anybody listening to moderate your expectations and enthusiasm about the technology and really do a lot more engagement with the customer base and figure out who's actually going to pay for the things that you want to build. Because you may be right, but unless somebody's going to pay for it, it isn't really a business, right? It's more of an academic pursuit. And that's a lesson I learned. So we had a brilliant idea, which I think in many respects was proven correct over time. But without customer engagement, it really didn't have a business model. So being right wasn't worth anything, frankly. And personally, I almost bankrupted myself. I took down a lot of money from my friends and family and put myself hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. I ran the company on credit cards. I was so convinced that I was right. And I was, like I said, I was right, but the right didn't matter unless somebody was going to, return the favor by sending you some revenue, right? So you got to be careful not to stand too much on principle or pursue your own dreams and make it realistic. So I worked my butt off, but it failed. And that's something that has informed a lot of my choices, obviously. But I crawled my way back, and I used that experience to take jobs in other startups, learn the game a little better, both not on the creative side, but also, like I said, on the revenue side, and did much better in subsequent outings. A number of things, small and large, that I worked for other people and also built myself. And now I mostly help other founders to cross those bridges with a little less damage, perhaps, than I received.
Right. I mean, you could be intellectually correct, but in business, that may not be enough.
Yeah, right.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I saw that you became an operator in a variety of companies, including very large corporates, and building interactive and digital businesses for them. Curious, at what point did you realize, okay, well, I want to kind of step away from that, or maybe it's the right time to step away from that, and I should work with entrepreneurs, doing books and the various platforms we're going to talk about.
Yeah, the challenge of the corporate world is that it can pay very well and has lots of security and benefits, but they also, the more they pay you, the more they want, right? And you end up really living your life on other people's terms. And that's a great deal if you are the kind of person who can do that. You can make really a lot of money. I was making a lot of money in several different corporate jobs. I probably would have made more money, frankly, if I had just stayed in the various corporate positions I had, because I tended to rise quickly and was given a lot of responsibility at a young age. And it just wasn't for me. I didn't like it. I really had an urge inside to steer my own ship and set my own priorities. And the best way to do that is as your own boss, whether it's a small operation, a hot dog stand, or a t-shirt shop, or whatever, or it's something larger that is a scalable business where you need outside investors and to grow a team. Either way, for me, it's a personality trait that I'm just happier this way. So like I said, I went from big corporate at Wall Street Bank, investment bank, to running my own show. And then, those are kind of two extremes. And then I worked for some startups, and then larger, I tried a bunch of things, I guess what I'm trying to say. And everybody's got to find their own personal mix. There's no one size fits all. It's your life. You have one chance to do this. But in that one big chance, there are lots of little chances. And I would encourage everybody to, especially if you're a young person, to take a bunch of different jobs and ask a lot of questions and try things. And I learned quickly that it's better, it's ideal to know exactly what you want to do, but in a fast-moving field like the internet or online media or any of these spaces that Najor and I both work in, it's hard to know what you want to do because it's not here yet, right? Like what I do there was no job description. This didn't exist when I was a kid. So you just got to be out there constantly opening doors and figuring out. And my point is, it's good to try things and learn what you don't want to do, because then you can cross things off, right? So I didn't want to be an investment banker. Well, that took a whole sector off the plate, and then I tried entertainment. That was cool, but it wasn't, I took another sector off the plate. And so I narrowed my focus. And like you said, I started writing these books. They're in English there and in many other languages around the world, because it combined my experience. It turned out I had a good way of talking to people and helping people. And I really enjoyed that. And I wanted to help other people, honestly, because of where I came from, people didn't have very much and they didn't see these opportunities. And I still today am deeply committed to trying to help other people participate in this revolution, because I think a lot of the expertise that's been created has not really been shared very well. Well, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, let's talk about. I might the Kindle that I purchased now, but let's talk about one of those books. I know we talked about it a little bit also when we met, but tell us what the idea behind Click Millionaires.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So this is the third book I wrote, but all books really, and these are nonfiction books. They're not novels. They're business self-help, essentially. That's what I call it. So it's business, but it's to help you as a person. It's not big picture theory, leadership strategies or something like a lot of business books. They're really tactical books, because so many people that I met they want to start a company, and they may be brilliant and have expertise that is very useful, but they may not have the business skills or the confidence to exercise that, right? To run a mental process of picking between many ideas they have. That's a common thing. If you're an entrepreneur, you have 1,000 ideas. Well, which is the good one, right? Or if you have one, how do you grow that into a self-sustaining, scalable operation that can generate revenue, like we talked about, but also scale with outside investor money to create something really large? And that's what my books are about. And this is the third one. The first one, Internet Riches, was kind of my personal story, which you've already heard some of, plus a bunch of exercises for people to analyze their own path. And then the second one was about social media marketing, back when that was a new thing. And then this is about 10 years old now. Yeah, there you go. And the Click Millionaires book is 10 years old, but so the examples aren't necessarily so current anymore, but the strategies are. And the strategies are, who am I? What do I like to do? Crossed with who do I want to be? And how can I get from here to there through tactical steps like, and this is written, like I said, 10 years ago. So, it's like how to start a blog, how to try podcasting, what could I sell on Amazon, like real tactical ideas of how an individual who doesn't have an entrepreneurship background can take steps, really as what we call side hustles, right? So you're not going to, sell your house if you own a house, or raise $1 million in venture capital and build Uber or Zoom or Facebook, build some huge thing. But what's a small thing that you could learn to be an entrepreneur in? And sorry, you get me going. I could talk about these things for hours, obviously, but that's what Click Millionaires is. It's a guide for regular people who've read about this entrepreneurship stuff and want to give it a try. And it's me trying to help you do that. That's what it is. And that's what all the Startup Council, startupcouncil.org stuff is. It's trying to help folks who may not have gotten the places I've gotten, and trying to help them join me, because I think everybody deserves a shot.
Yeah, and even I was kind of in researching for this, I was looking through like even the booklet you shared, like the free booklet everybody gets whenever they sign up for your newsletter,
Oh,
to start an online business. And I'm like, wow, like this is very tactical. Like, it's
yeah.
like 20 steps to kind of from point A to point Z. And so I got very interested in kind of reading more about Click millionaires and others, and hopefully those in the audience can also learn more about Scott's work. I think this is a good segue to, like you mentioned, startup council. So one of the things you've been doing over the last decade plus is you've been kind of building a system, like an innovation ecosystem, all kind of onto itself,
Yeah.
and it's global now. And you've got the startup council, you've got the national startups directory, you've got the startup events, investors directory. I think there's also a startup
Yeah.
helpers website. You've also obviously involved with the various, angel groups, but maybe starting with the startup council
This
itself.
is
Like,
great. This
tell
is
us
like a
about,
big commercial. Thank you.
yeah, no worries, but tell us a little bit more about like how it evolved. I understand it started as the OC Startup Council.
Yeah,
What was
that's
the
right.
initial vision, and what is the vision now? I guess mission now.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate this because I really am trying to help people. I don't make money doing this stuff. It tries to break even, but it really is a volunteer effort to try to help people who don't have access to a lot of the resources, and maybe don't like me. Like, I'm a white male from America, right, who went to Stanford, and I wasn't. That wasn't my choice. Well, the Stanford part was my choice, I guess. I worked very hard to do that, but these are benefits that I had that, even though I didn't have much money, I did have that, and I was located in a rich country that allows a lot of upward mobility. So these are all my efforts to help other people join that party, essentially. So anyway, so Startup Council, yes, it started here. I live in Orange County, California, which is between San Diego and Los Angeles. So it's a very nice place to live, but it's pretty suburban. And there were a lot of entrepreneurs, but not much community. And I saw what happened in Palo Alto, for example, when Palo Alto went from being, which is where Stanford University is here in Northern California. And Palo Alto went from being a sleepy college town to suddenly being the center of the universe because these software companies were headquartered there. And I've been working to try to help the Orange County community do that for half a dozen years now, running workshops and holding events and getting people together and investing and so forth. So anyway, that's gone pretty well here. We have a more cohesive community here now in the Orange County. I was just at an event last night where we have 100 people and most of them know each other, and it's starting to really generate the relationships that lead to investment, that lead to company establishment, growth, and success. So I realized, of course, that once it's online, you don't just have to do it here, you can do it everywhere. So that's what Startup Council is. It's a collection of the things that I saw work best here in Orange County and that other people aren't really doing. So I'm not trying to compete with any other ecosystem organization. I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm filling in holes. And the other this is the segue to the other. If you scroll down a little, actually, if we're going to do this, thank you. You can see we help founders, so that we have a blog which is publishing the accomplishments of startups who are part of our ecosystem, and then you keep going and you'll see the other websites that you flashed over to. So one of the biggest problems early stage founders have is, how do I find an investor that is interested in me? And the resources for that stuff are incredibly gate kept, if that's a word. Like, to use PitchBook or the standard resources, it costs $10,000 to $12,000. I mean, what early stage founder has that kind of money? It's just not fair. And so anyway, we put this together. This has got 3,000 early stage investors, and it's $39, or it's free with some of the codes you can find online if you sign up for the newsletters, right? So just trying to give access to people who deserve access. And then if you keep going, the other side of that is, where are you going to publicize yourself if you're an early stage startup? So it's really hard to get attention because there's so many startups. So this is another directory of 42, I think, different categories of startups, and investors can come and look around in a standardized way, and they can run searches. There's keyword searches and location searches, and we can even search on ethnicity or what sector you're in, or stage, or you're an immigrant, or all kinds of different things, so that we can surface founders who may not already be in Palo Alto and a white male who has rich parents. Those are not the people that need the help. So yeah, and then so on and so forth. So this is an event. This is actually probably really useful for your audience, Nurjor. And everybody in Bangladesh is particularly invited. This is completely free. This is the world's only calendar of virtual events for founders. That's all it is. It's a newsletter that publicizes events that are oriented towards helping founders, and they're only virtual. So you don't have to go to San Francisco, right? And you don't have to live in London or Mumbai or some big city. You can be online. And that's one of the great things about the internet that I'm trying to exploit here is you can live anywhere and get this access to this information. And we're trying to publicize that in one place. So if you're a founder, you can sign up and learn, get invited to events that could help you, even though you live, say, in Bangladesh, as opposed to in California. And this page goes on for an hour, so we could, I run office hours, like you said. We do free YouTube channel to try to help people. Did one of those on Tuesday. We get people from all over the world that bring questions. I'm happy to help during my lunch hour. These are the workshops that are run here in Orange County, and now we do those online as well. We have meetup groups in 40 cities around the world. And if you have one, I don't actually know if we have one in Bangladesh. Maybe we should. Maybe we could do that together.
We should.
Startup helpers. This is a new one. You can see in the sample there's still sample users. This is really not even fully launched yet, but the idea here is, again, just a directory. There's not any money to be made here really, but when you're a founder, the first question I always get is, where can I find money? And then the other question is, how can I help investors find me? So those are the first two directories, right? And then people get going like, how can I learn? And that's the events, startupevents.org. And then the other one is, how can I find a good lawyer? And then a good incorporation lawyer, then a good patent lawyer. And then I need dev help, the developers. And this is a directory designed to do that. And it's just getting started, where service providers can come and list themselves. So again, it's a directory very specifically for founders, like not just any jobs board or a public Google search, but these are people that it costs a little bit amount of money for the lawyers to list themselves, but they're lawyers who want to reach founders like you, right? So it's targeted. And like you can say, it's just samples right now, but it's about to spin up. And the idea, like you said, I've created my own ecosystem. I'm an entrepreneur. I like to run things myself. All of this is in-house, built with a small team, and we're just trying to help. So sorry, you get me going. This is what I do.
Yeah,
So
no, I love it. I love it, and I'd love to kind of take some of those lessons for us as well, because we're always in the perpetual kind of mode of ecosystem building, right? And one question is, maybe can you give us a sense of scale now? How many countries are participants coming from? How many events are you guys doing physically and online a year? How many companies are in these directories, whether as investors, service providers, or founders?
Yeah, that's there's a lot of different questions there. I guess the preface would be, this is a fully developed effort in Orange County, California. It's fairly new on the global scale. The Startup Investors Directory has 3,000 plus investors. We're adding new ones all the time. The Startups Directory is still in the dozens, I think. The Startup Helpers has basically zero. These are new-ish. But the point is that they're all scalable. And that's what I've been doing. I spent this year basically building these things so that when I go out, and like when we met in Melbourne recently, I was on stage talking about, I was on, did two different sessions, as you may recall, talking to the audiences, so that when I talk to the audiences, I can drive them here. Because that's what I really do these days. I write books, and I visit with people like you online, and I try to help people. And all that is driving towards this. So it's all kind of emerging. The newsletters are global for sure. I mean, like I said, the YouTube office hours I did the other day, we had people from Berlin and Manila and all over the United States. And the only limit there is what time of day I do it, because it's in the middle of the night for some people. Although there was a guy from Hong Kong who was up at like 3 a.m, and some other people from Mumbai as well. So yeah, it's certainly is global. The spark of entrepreneurship is everywhere these days, and I find that exciting. I think diversity is really cool and interesting. Like when we were in Melbourne, right? I remember we were in a taxi together, and it was you and me and a guy from Canada and a guy from, I mean, it was all over the place, right? And really, really fun and stimulating. So that's the plan, is to help people, to meet people where they are and try to help them with what they need.
I'm also curious, this is a question we often ask ourselves all the time, because I think on one hand, you have to do so much ecosystem building to be even, get in the conversation monetization, but then it becomes challenging sometimes to monetize your time and efforts so that at least you're not losing money, like you mentioned, breaking even.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious, how are, what's the revenue model behind this? How are you financing and sustaining these endeavors?
Yeah, it's a valid question. Well, the financing is me. I'm an angel investor anyway, so I kind of see this as my give back sort of portion of my career in life, right? So I paid for it all up front and still do. And then along the way, I've been able to find sponsors. It's a sponsorship model, is the short answer. And there are companies that if you build audiences, as we all know, the hard thing these days is to get attention. And people who are service providers are busy providing their services rather than generally being real good at marketing. So this is essentially a business development engine for both for the founders themselves, but also for the service providers. And they will pay to reach these audiences if I build them. So not a lot, but it covers the costs. And I do most of this with, depends on how you count it, half a dozen people part-time in different countries around the world. And, I hope it will scale, but for me, it's not a money-making venture. That's the real answer. Before I started this, I did a lot of research, and for any of you who are ecosystem builders, it's hard to make money in an ecosystem. If you want to make big money, I mean, you might be able to support yourself, but if you want to get wealthy enough to become an angel investor, this is not the work for you. It's really something you do later. Like I'm a little older now. Or it serves other means, like have a consultancy or some kind of service. Like if you're a law firm, you could probably do this and generate new law clients, or you get nonprofit sort of grants from the government or somebody like that. There's not a lot of money here, but it's work that needs to be done. And I obviously I hope it hasn't happened yet, but I hope to benefit on the back end, because my thesis is that if you support the entrepreneurs more, it creates more deals. We invest in those deals. Some of those deals do well, not all, because they're startups, but maybe a few of those will do real well, and they'll feed back into the community, and that will uplift the community as well as my own portfolio too. So,
excellent. I think that's a great segue. And obviously, being Boundless Angels, I think we might be remiss if we didn't talk about your investing and trying to glean some, glean some lessons from there. First, tell us a little bit about the key groups you're part of. How are they different, and why did you choose to, I guess, be a part of them? I know it's Tech Coast Angels. I know SoCal Angels. There's Launch Syndicate. I know you're part of the Stanford Angels group as well.
Yeah, I do a lot of that. I guess the one I was going to say the most active. Which one am I most? Well, anyway, I'll start at the top. Tech Coast Angels. So Tech Coast Angels is a very large, maybe the largest angel group in America, and we're based here in Southern California, 400 and some members, and we do deals of all sorts, although it's not just tech, but early stage, pre-seed, well, not really pre-seed much anymore, but seed mostly, seed or maybe Series A deals. And I joined that one mostly because that's where I am and that's who I met. And this was pre-COVID. So you kind of did deals with people that were nearby and companies that were nearby. We were all much more geographically constrained 5 or 10 years ago, right? And that was the tradition in angel investing. And it was fantastic because, and this is a big recommendation for anybody that's listening, either as an angel or a want-to-be angel or as an entrepreneur, get involved with an angel group as soon as you can, like Bangladesh Angels or any other one that's appropriate for you, because that's how you learn. And it's hard to be a good angel investor. And I'm still not sure I am, right? Most of my portfolio is still new enough that it hasn't, it hasn't really exploded into the wealth that I, hoping for. But you learn by working with other people, and an angel group is a great place to meet really smart people. And the best part of the screenings that we go to is always the questions that my fellow angels ask the founders, and everybody learns when you do that. So yeah, I got involved with Tech Coast Angels. I'm very active with that. The Thai SoCal Angels is a group. This is the Indian Entrepreneurs Association, based here in the United States, but is in I think 50 countries or something like that now, including India, of course. So these are a lot of my Indian friends as well as non-Indian friends as well. And there I'm actually most active in the women's fund, because they have, we started a fund a few years ago that focuses specifically on funding women entrepreneurs, which is another thing I like to support. So that's something I'd recommend also for anybody who's interested. Find the niche that is interesting to you, because there's lots of different kinds of people that deserve support. And this doesn't mean charity. It means helping educate founders and helping encourage them to build scalable businesses that solve real problems for real customers, right? This is not just charity, at least for me. This part isn't my charity, although the time I invest with the founders, I guess, is. And then Launch is a big Jason Calacanis' syndicate, and I've been active in that for many years. And Stanford Angels, like you said, I run that in this area in Orange County. That's people from Stanford University, obviously. And I'm involved with a bunch of others too that aren't probably on my bio, but my approach has been to have a portfolio of individual investments, but also to have a portfolio of groups that I'm involved in. And that's both because it diversifies the risk, but also because it's more interesting and you learn faster. And that's really, I guess I'm a lifelong learner. And angel groups are a fantastic way to learn, because there are no dummies in an angel group. Some of them may be, less friendly than others, or arrogant even, but they're not dumb. And that's a great place to learn.
When did you start angel investing, first of all, and how did that happen? And how large is your portfolio now? How many companies have you invested over the last 2 decades?
Yeah, I've only been investing about, might be almost 10 years now, but I started small. And this isn't another tip for anybody. You don't have to start with $100,000 per deal. I think my first investment was $1,200, I think, something like that, in a company that folded pretty quickly after that. And, the first few, especially, you don't know what you're doing. And early on, for example, I was, especially when I joined Chairman of Angels, they do a lot of medical device and med tech deals. And I don't know anything about that. I'm a software guy. So every presentation, I was like, wow, this guy's going to cure cancer. And, this guy invented artificial hearts. And this is amazing, And so I put money in several of those, and I had no credentials. I shouldn't have done that. I lost the money because I was just, I was kidding a candy store. So you got to be clever and listen to the people around you, be skeptical. So yeah, I'm probably in, it's enough deals that I've lost track, 30 plus direct deals. And I stopped doing direct deals several years ago because I just can't keep up with the amount of inquiries I get. I only invest now, that's the other reason I belong to these groups, because we do group due diligence together. So Tech Coast Angels looks at things together, and we have a fund where we put in things together. And that way we kind of crowdsource the expertise. And so yeah, it's enough companies that I've lost track, and not thousands, but several dozen, and they're mostly in software. And yeah, mostly it's software, but it's opportunistic. I was into crypto big for a while because that was an interesting opportunity. You got to play the cards you're dealt, and take opportunity where you see it.
Got it. And so now I guess obviously you're still an angel, but your approach is more by investing by way of being an LP in these funds that are run by these syndicates. Is that correct?
Yeah, it depends on yes, definitely an LP in several funds. Some of the angel groups have funds, like TCA has several funds now. Others are still on a case-by-case basis. So you do the due diligence together, but then you may write a check personally, either directly to the company or into a SPV, a special purpose vehicle that's set up for that investment. So there's a combination depending on what's the tradition in that organization. Although I'll say, since this is an angel audience, a lot of them are setting up funds now, it seems like, because it makes it smoother, faster. And one of the big knocks on angel groups, in my experience, is, as a founder, I saw this as well, that they take so long because it's a lot of individual decisions, and it's hard to get. There's no urgency from the investor's perspective, but the founder is always in a hurry. And if there's a fund set up that has guidelines, we respond this quickly and we have to get back by, within 30 days, it just moves things along. And it is a preset amount generally, with this $200,000 per check, ding, ding, ding. It just kind of lubricates the wheels. And that's a trend.
I'm curious, maybe this is also a lesson, because we've looked into this. And one question I would have is, if you were to create a fund, versus doing individual checks or individual deals and individuals cut checks within those deals, how do you balance the fact that maybe there's a bit of democratized decision making versus you want an IC investment committee, you want fast decision making, but these individual angels might still want to say, okay, well, I want some input in the process. What's my input? Right? I'm curious how to balance that.
Yeah, that we've worked hard on that at Tech Coast Angels, and I'm not the expert. I can connect you with some friends of mine if you'd like him, sure, because it's a big effort, right? But the balance tends to be you need to have clear guidelines, and everybody has to be on board. So if a person totally wants independent action, they probably shouldn't be in the fund, but they could still do what we call a sidecar investment, right? So if they're still part of the group, and we do that with both, right? So if your company came to us, a bunch of people liked us, liked the company, due diligence went well. The fund, like I said, has a preset process, and that's based on a quorum of the people in the fund approve it, and they can vote at two different levels: $150,000 check or it's $100,000 and $200,000 checks. Depending on their enthusiasm. So that process is known, right? And that can happen. But if you're part of the group, you can still invest directly, because at that point you've met the founders as well, right? And people do that all the time. I do that sometimes, right? Like, I like the company, so my piece of the fund will go into that $200,000 check, but maybe I'll also call you and say, hey, I've got another 20 grand or 50 grand, let's do this, also. And that's, you can balance both, but you're correct that is a natural tension. Yeah.
Got it. And I mean, I know we don't have too much time, but what have been some of your biggest exits or wins till date, and how did they happen? What are there any patterns or insights you can glean, whether it's the sector, whether it's the founder, whether it's the stage, and opportunity and the exit approach?
Yeah, I wish I had bigger stories about that. They're never as big as you want. That's the trick with angel investing. So be careful is my first learning, right? Like I already gave you a couple examples, right? There's a lot of failure involved in startup land, and that's something that people have to get comfortable with as a founder or as an investor. So, yeah, there was a couple companies that have done really well in the 7, 8, 9 figure, 8 figure range, I guess. No, 9 figure range. Yeah. But as an angel, you end up with a very small piece of that. So I was interviewed on another YouTube channel a couple of weeks ago, and he asked a similar question, and I said, well, I was part of a $483 million exit. So the keyframe on the YouTube is my picture, $483 million. Like, I got the check. I was like, I didn't make $500 million personally, right? I made a piece of a piece of a piece that was diluted by several rounds later. And so, yeah, I got like a 8x or something on that piece, right? But so anyway, you understand, you're laughing, right? You get it, right? It's like, yeah, so pattern, so actionable intel, I guess, is, yeah, pattern matching. It's really a lot about founders who can run through walls, who has just got a real drive to do this, who listens to the customer early on and is not a know-it-all, who can adapt, good with people. I mean, it's not, everybody has a checklist, and you're never going to get 100% on that list. But I think it is about pattern recognition and doing the work. You really got to dig in and figure out where the opportunities are. One of the things I really see is confirmation bias. A lot of angels will invest because they see a company and the company's really cool and the founders are great and the opportunity, like, oh, check, this is great, but they convince themselves it's good, and then they don't do enough looking at the competition, right? And this may be the first time you've learned, like I said, like, a heart valve device or something. Like, I didn't know about the rest of the world of heart valve devices, so I didn't realize that there were lots of these, right? And you need to do that and not just convince yourself you're right. You have to break out and look around if you're going to survive, because the market is moving all the time and competing, and just because a guy doesn't mean that, or gal, that doesn't mean they're the one, right? You've got to widen your perspective, and that's why it's good to be part of a group, because people have lots of different perspectives.
I know we're towards the end of our time, and there's so many things I'd love to ask you, but maybe that's always worth a follow up. Maybe one question is, I don't know if this is a tension necessarily in what you do, but on one hand, obviously a lot of your ethos or work is around encouraging people to build sustainable businesses, right? The ones that can run themselves and start as side hustles. On the other hand, obviously you're trying to invest in startups that can generate many-fold returns for investors as well as the founders. And those are very different types of businesses.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, in your work, has anybody been able to kind of merge the two? Maybe it started as a side hustle, but it became much bigger later on, right? Like, I don't know if anybody's been able to kind of bridge those two gaps, I guess, that gap.
Yeah, it's a good question. I saw that in the notes you sent me earlier. I couldn't think of anybody. But here's why. Not because I don't think it doesn't happen, but because people that like the books are about like more like how to build a lifestyle business, like how to get out of corporate America. Because like I said, a lot of books are about your own story. And that was my story, right? Like, how do I get out of this and do something of my own? And to do that and build your own business. And if you do that well, we don't hear from you again, right? You're busy. You've built a business. It's 100,000. It's a million. It's $5-10 million a year, and you're going to be very quiet about that because it's supporting your family and doing exactly what you want, right? You're not out at different conferences and broadcasting it. So it does work. But the number of people that turn say a $5 million private business into a scalable growth business, I don't have any examples of that offhand. I'm sure there are some, but they're just set up structurally differently, as you know, right? It might not even be a C corporation, like just legally, you don't have a share structure that would allow that, perhaps. So I think it's possible, but it's not something I'm tracking. They're, like you said, they're two different worlds, I think.
And on the other hand, there's been a lot of these kind of angel and VC-backed companies, particularly in the last few years, who have now reached a point where they probably will struggle to raise their next rounds,
Yeah.
right? I call them bridges to nowhere,
Yeah.
because they're just not hitting the metrics that they set out, and maybe the realization is actually this is not a venture scale business. It could be a great business. It's not a venture scale business, but obviously the capital stack is different. It doesn't show that. I'm curious if you're finding these types of opportunities now. Are you involved within your ecosystem or within your network? People who are acquiring these businesses to make them lifestyle businesses or maybe small businesses?
Yeah, I haven't seen that much yet, but I agree with your thesis. I think it's happening. It's just not where I'm looking. I just haven't looked for it. Absolutely. If that was what I wanted to do personally right now, and I had a fund or some capital to do that, I think there are a lot of opportunities. The problem with that is that you find, say, like continuing our example, a $5 million business that's doing well, is interesting, and is going to scale. That doesn't just take financial capital, takes human capital, and having the people available suddenly to step in and grow that is challenging, because anybody that's good is pretty employed these days. So you're moving really to more of a private equity or buyout model, right? And I think there's absolutely opportunity there, but it's going to be some work. And at least for me, like I said, I haven't looked, because what I'm trying to do these days is more help people get on the road than fix the car that they already built, if that's a bad metaphor. But I agree with your thesis. It's just not where I'm looking these days.
Yeah. And I guess the last question I would have for you is, what does the next 5 years look like for the Scott Fox ecosystem?
Sure. You actually spurred something in me, though, on the last question still. I think there's a big opportunity. I was actually talking to some guys about this. When was that? Wednesday morning, about roll-ups, right? Because if you have the capital, now would be a real interesting time where if you have a $5 million business and you can find 5 of those and put them together, buy them, and then maybe you don't need to bring in a lot of external human capital, because you've got a whole executive staff, and you can take the best of those 5 companies and turn that into an operating company that can scale. That's an interesting opportunity, but that's really a banking play rather than you understand, it's not necessarily an operational play as much, but there's a financial engineering opportunity there for sure. And that's pretty interesting, but a different way. So the question, sorry, next 5 years. Well, thanks for asking, and thanks for all of this. This is very generous of you. I am trying to help. I'm excited about doing this. I hope we can turn the tables. We haven't caught up lately. I'd like to hear more about what you're doing and what's going on in Bangladesh, as well as Texas. But next 5 years, well, it's more of this. I'm working on a couple books. Actually, the other part of my answer to your last question would be, my next book's gonna be about how to raise money, not surprisingly, because that's the number one problem that I see entrepreneurs having. And one of those is understanding what is and is not a venture backable model, right? Because a lot of people may have a great idea and it may spin off $2 million a year, which is fabulous as an individual, but that isn't necessarily a venture scalable business, right? And a lot of people don't know the difference. And anyway, it'll be easier for them if they do. So that's part of my next 5 years, I think, is a lot of book writing. I'm continuing to try to open the doors on how investors think, because I sit at this place where I'm a founder at heart, but I happen to have done well enough that I can be an investor and explain things. And I want to do more of that. I think it's helpful to people, I hope. And so books and speaking, and come visit you in Bangladesh, and we'll go together and have a conference or something. I don't know, that kind of thing. And these services, right? These services can help people, and ideally they're scalable, and they keep doing this long after I'm done doing it too. I'm trying to build long-term models that can help people, and that's what software can do. It can run on its own and scale, that's my goal, is to help people by doing that.
Lovely. Scott, thank you so much for your time. I think really appreciate your time. I only see this as like the continuation of hopefully a emerging relationship, and hopefully we can do more work together in the future, including stuff in Bangladesh. So I'm very grateful for your time, and thank you so much.
All right. No, thank you. Nice to meet you. Thanks, Najjar.
Excellent. Thanks, Scott.